Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the Marksmanship Hunter YouTube guide for patch 8.1. So in part 2 of this guide, we're going to cover talents and consumables. Consumables are pretty straightforward for Marksmanship Hunter. Let's start out with weapon enchants. In the previous tier, incendiary ammo was really good for us. Unfortunately, incendiary doesn't scale, so now that we have a higher eye level in Battle of Dazaralor, most players have outscaled it. Now our go-to weapon enchant is Masterful Navigation. Depending on your gear, Monolite Scope of Alacrity may be better for you. As always, you should sim yourself to determine what enchant best suits you. For rings and gems, like I mentioned in part 1 of the guide, most people just want mastery. So Pact of Mastery and Masterful Tidal Amethyst are the go-to for the majority of players. We no longer want Kraken's Eye of Agility since, for the majority of players, Mastery, along with most other stats, is weighted much heavier than Agility these days. Here's a quick sim I did last night showing you my stat weights so that you have an idea of where Mastery stands compared to Agility. Again, sim yourself to double check. For food, we still want Bountiful Captain's Feast or Sanguinated Feast if it's available. If it's not available, use Sailor's Pie, the 75 stat mastery food. For a lot of people, the Sailor's Pie is just barely behind main stat food since Mastery has become so good for us. For potions and flasks, we still use Battle Potion of Agility and the Flask of the Currents. Nothing has changed there. Alright, let's get into talents now. So here's the default build for Marksmanship Hunters. You will rarely swap out of these talents, and you'll end up using this for about 95% of the content this tier. I'm going to go through each of the talent rows and shortly explain why we pick these talents so you can have a better idea of why we pick each talent that we do. I'm only going to cover the talents that are relevant at this time. Many marksmanship talent options will never be taken, so it's not really worth discussing them. Row 1. The first row is pretty set in stone. Master Marksman is just too good to ever swap out of. It allows us to cast aim shot and rapid fire with free empowered arcane shots throughout the entire duration of True Shot. Without this talent, during the latter half of True Shot, we are forced to cast Steady Shot and cap on aim shots because we don't have enough focus or we end up wasting all of our precise shots. It feels extremely clunky. Outside of True Shot, this talent helps our focus a ton, reducing the amount of steady shots we need to cast and giving us extra focus to cast more arcane shots, which synchronizes really well with calling the shots, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Row 2. Row 2 is another row that is pretty set in stone. You will be picking Careful Aim for 95% of all situations. Careful Aim gives us both an execute and a reverse execute. This gives us incredible burst right out of the gate, as well as solid damage as the boss is dying. Careful Aim is just too crucial compared to the other talents and is really the only talent that benefits us on pure single target. For raids, most fights have some benefit or damage check during execute, or need to quickly burn ads for some reason or another. Careful Aim is the only talent in this row that gives us that priority target damage, so it's an amazing talent compared to the rest. Not abusing Careful Aim is perhaps one of the biggest mistakes new marksmanship hunters make. Remember, any new ad that spawns is an opportunity for additional damage through Careful Aim, so quickly swapping and having an aim shot charge stored up for that new ad spawn is key. Explosive Shot has recently been remade and now explodes on the target after 3 seconds, dealing AoE damage. It also no longer disappears when the target dies, and it no longer requires you to manually activate it. It can be somewhat usable in Mythic Plus on lower keys where mobs die fairly quickly. Essentially, you can use it when the mobs die so quick that you cannot benefit from Careful Aim reliably. The downside of using Explosive Shot is that your single target damage will suffer. Personally, I don't ever recommend this talent, especially in raids, but it is not totally unusable like some of the other talents. Row 3 is a utility row, so just take whichever talent suits the situation best. Generally, you'll always be taking Natural Mending for the extra bit of cooldown reduction on Exhilaration. For transmog runs and niche situations, Trailblazer can be pretty useful, and for Mythic Plus, Camo is typically the go-to for different skips. Camouflage is also the go-to for PvP. Row 4. Row 4 is our only row that actually has multiple usable talents. Hunter's Mark is going to be your go-to here. It is without a doubt your best talent for pure single target, and it is also your best talent for mid-range AoE. Streamline and Steady Focus start to catch up once you hit about 4 targets, but Hunter's Mark still has better priority target damage. Hunter's Mark is your go-to for raid and can be used in Mythic Plus, especially for tyrannical weeks. It should be used on any target that lasts for more than 10 to 12 seconds. For example, in the Battle of Dazaralor, the Raptors on Conclave or the Sirens on Blockade generally don't need a Hunter's Mark depending on how fast you kill them, but the ads on Gronk should have a Hunter's Mark placed on them since they last longer. Streamline can take over Hunter's Mark in Mythic Plus depending on your gear setup and Azurite traits. Like Steady Focus, Streamline becomes better than Hunter's Mark at around the 4 target mark. The main issue with Streamline is that it screws up with our True Shot windows. The extended rapid fire reduces the amount of aim shots we can cast during True Shot, making it feel pretty clunky. Streamline requires very high haste, namely it requires a Gale Caller's boon to be useful. The Gale Callers gives you so much haste that it reduces your rapid fire cast to feel essentially the same as it does without Streamline. This means that you get to pump out more aim shots during True Shot like normal. If you don't have a Gale Callers and try to spec into Streamline, it will require you to have a ton of haste, which may or may not be worth it compared to Hunter's Mark. If you do not have the gear for it, I recommend sticking with Hunter's Mark in Mythic Plus. As always, to figure out what the best setup for you is, head over to raidboss.com and sim yourself. Row 5 is another utility row. Generally, you won't ever take Born to be Wild except maybe on transmog runs. Post haste is our go-to, especially for raids. The extra movement speed and snare remove will help us get into position better and reduce downtime while performing different mechanics. Binding Shot can be useful in Mythic Plus and should be taken depending on the dungeon, affixes, and your group composition. Row 6 is another row that doesn't differ much. Double Tap is going to be your go-to here. It's our best single target talent and is great in AoE due to its controlled nature. The major downside to Double Tap in AoE is that since it depends on aim shot, you are still restricted by the target restrictions imposed by trick shots. For usage, you generally want to use it on cooldown. You typically want to pair it with aim shot during careful aim if you're close to full focus, and with rapid fire outside of careful aim, or you can use it with rapid fire during careful aim if you need the focus. It may also be worth saving double tap for ad spawns. If you are starting from out of combat, it is always worth pre-casting double tap to save a GCD inside your true shot. I'll talk a bit more about double tap in our rotation video later in the series. Barrage is everyone's favorite talent that gave hunters a bad name back in the day. Luckily, we don't use it anymore. Unlike double tap and lethal shots, Barrage is not affected by trick shots target restrictions, so it can deal damage to any number of targets. The downside is that taking this talent really hurts us in pure single target situations. The dangerous chance at pulling unwanted mobs aside, due to the fact that we lose a pretty decent chunk of single target damage, you generally want to avoid using Barrage. Barrage can be usable for Mythic Plus for like Fortified plus teaming weeks where there's a ton of AoE, but again, it's risky and personally I don't think it's worth and it's just way easier to stick to double tap. The last row, row 7. Our go-to talent in this row is Calling the Shots. Casting Arcane Shot and Multi-Shot now reduces the cooldown of True Shot. Doing a normal single target rotation, our True Shot becomes about 1 minute and 15 seconds as opposed to the standard 2 minutes. Since True Shot is so big for us now, the more frequent uses of it is a huge benefit. On top of this, traits such as Enduring Vision make this talent even better. Master Marksman also synergizes really well with Calling the Shots, giving us additional focus to spend on more arcane shots and multi-shots to further reduce the cooldown of True Shot. Lock and Load can be decent, especially if you don't have any Unerring Vision traits. As soon as you get one or more Unerring Vision traits, Calling the Shots will always take the cake. Lock and Load is also really hit or miss due to its random nature. Because of this, Calling the Shots will almost always be better in AoE situations regardless of traits. Alright guys, that wraps up part 2 of our Marksmanship Hunter YouTube guide. Next up will be our single target rotation video. If you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button to see more like it. As always, feel free to join my Discord or come hang out on Twitch if you have any questions, or to find the most up-to-date content. Thanks for watching, guys.